So nice to have everybody back again. Have you ever wondered what the Purpose Highway is and what it has to do with ice cream? You might also be wondering what this has to do with DEI. This illustrates actually all the many different flavors of DEI. We are excited to have you here with us today. This conversation has you buzzing for more. I am looking forward to you all meeting my guest today. We value your feedback and your opinions. Please drop them in the chat or in your comment boxes in social media. We intend to respond to as many comments and questions as possible from our audience. Please, this takes a great deal of effort from all of us to put all this content together as we create it weekly. Follow Diversity Connects Us on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts. My name is Rochelle Carrier, and I'm a DEI personal consultant and EQ coach. As an EQ coach and authoress of Emotional Intelligence, a toolkit for managing diversity, equity, and inclusion, in my book, I share strategies and practical examples of EQ. The link to purchase the book will be in the comments. For a living, I help organizations implement DEI plans with an emotional intelligence framework and to help reframe cultural mindsets through thought-provoking workshops and webinars. Join us as we continue to share the different voices in the DEI space. Today, we have Mr. Donald Knight, and I would love you to introduce yourself in your unique way to the audience, as this is our second part of a series.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Donald Knight. I have the privilege of being the Chief People Officer for a phenomenal hiring software company known as Greenhouse. Most importantly, I am a loving husband to an amazing woman named Ashley Knight. And my favorite title in the world is being Dalen's dad, he's my 12-year-old. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. I mentioned ice cream at the beginning of the conversation only because I think it was what stood out for me the most when you had mentioned. I'll let you tell the story. I want you to tell the story to start it off.
Absolutely. Yes. I am well known as an ice cream enthusiast. I love ice cream. I think it is one of the few universal languages that we have on this planet called Earth. People can identify with their own flavor. Some people don't even like ice cream. They moved more to like gelato for lactate purposes. Some people like sorbet, but just it's one of those things that it's a universal language. And I have found that it's an easy way to be able to bridge proximity with other people. And so folks always ask me, Donald, what's your favorite ice cream? I have tons of different ice cream shops that I go. But more importantly, I spend time with folks at Greenhouse eating ice cream. It's just an easier way for me to meet people inside of the organization and really learn more about their story. The thought of food and consumption is one of those things that so many humans in the past have recognized as an easy way for you to build community with people. And so ice cream allows me to do that in a unique way where I don't even have to cook any. So it's pretty cool.
Exactly. So when you said in building proximity with people, can you elaborate on how you would do that with the ice cream? Because I could see how it bridges the gap. But if you want to elaborate a little bit for our listeners.
Yeah, so there's multiple ways, right? So for the people who actually enjoy consuming ice cream, that typically means like, hey, let's do a walking meeting, which I've done with people. We'll walk to an ice cream shop. I learn more about them. I get to learn more about their personalities and their likes and dislikes, even in the flavor that they choose. I ask questions around why did you choose that flavor? How long have you been eating ice cream? And then there's just like this joy that overcomes people when it comes to eating ice cream because it is a dessert. It has been positioned for most of us as a treat. And for me, it's a treat to learn more and more about other people. For the folks that are like, hey, I don't necessarily like ice cream, I allow them to choose what other flavors they may like. So they may say, I'm a sorbet person or I'm a gelato person. But this idea of creating proximity with people is really getting to know them more at a way that's not just surface level. I believe that it makes it easier for me to be an advocate for them, for me to champion them on anything that they're trying to do from their career perspective, and even learn a little bit more about their home life. And it's a practical way for people to do this without going to the ice cream shop, right? So Our phenomenal CMO, Karen Van Buren, we had like this nice analyst day where we brought a bunch of analysts together, and she knows how much I love ice cream. And so we did an ice cream breaker where people are able to say like, hey, what's your favorite flavor? Why? And when's the last time you've had it? And but you believe it or not, you learn so much about people. Like we found out that some people like Rocky Road because their great grandmother used to actually make Rocky Road ice cream for them, and they haven't had some in a while since they were with their siblings. It's like a routine for them when they meet up with as siblings to make the Rocky Road that their grandmother had made. So like those types of things you're not going to learn when you do just like two lies and a truth or like any of the other icebreakers that are out there. So it allows us to be a little bit more personable.
Absolutely. And I think also ice cream, it's or sorbet or whatever dessert it is, it really makes you feel good. You
Yeah,
feel good. And it always conjures up a memory, like you said, of of someone's family or a moment. Ice cream just seems to bridge that gap to and it unearths all these memories that we have associated to ice cream.
absolutely. And that's the point, right? Like um, when I say universal languages that connects people, I'm saying things like ice cream, food, music. These are all things that typically bring people joy. Um, and that's when you get to see them in their most honest, authentic self. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Right. Yeah, I remember in our last episode, you had mentioned when someone says good morning, you say bad morning. And how does that build proximity?
Yeah, I think in life we have become so accustomed to demonstrating um, nice actions that they become a checkbox. And so for me, like I want to throw off the programming a little bit in order to really connect with people. So you're spot on. Like if somebody says good morning, I'm often one to say no, bad morning, because it throws off the programming. It's like, no, you're supposed to say good morning. So they're now more listening and their awareness is more heightened because they want to know, hey, why did you say that? The ones that are truly empathetic, they'll say, hey, what's going on? What's wrong? How can I help? The ones that are just checking the box, they're like, huh? They're just like caught off guard. They may not say anything. Another thing to do is like when you call like your favorite pizzeria, they're always busy. So they say, can you hold please? I say no. Completely throws them off the programming. They're like, huh? Like what? You can't hold? Like they're so used to and I to me it's indicative of what happens with relationships between humans, right? Like we've gotten to a point that it's so cyclical and it's so programmed that um no one's stopping to actually create real valuable relationship. I say the same thing for people teams. Like if the biggest difference to me between an HR and a people team is do you even feel the people aspect, right? Like particularly in this time frame right now where the macro economy is so unpredictable, you see conversations left and right around layoffs. There's hard events to even watch on the West Coast. We just saw a video come out over the weekend around Tyree and like, what does all that even look like? And so for me, it's like, do you insert a people aspect when you're connecting with people? And I want people to know that at Greenhouse, like we care about people, like we put people first. And so that means like you're not going to just get program language. Like you're not going to just go through a hiring process where it's like, hey, what's your name? Tell me a little bit about yourself. Uh, Tell me about a time where you had like, no, like that's not what we're doing. That's not what we're interested in. Um, and unfortunately, I think for businesses, it means that they haven't been able to unlock the full potential of the people at their places of work, regardless if they're distributed, remote, hybrid, or in person, because everybody's still on the wheel doing the programming, right? They haven't injected a people first lens into how they do what they do. And so that's where you end up finding companies that have HR teams that are not trusted, or you go to those companies and men leaders are treated differently than women leaders, or they're if you look across ethnicities, historically underrepresented populations have a very different look, feel, and experience than those that may identify as in the majority. That's where you find that is because it's just cyclical. So it's like, oh, we care about diversity, but then it's just on a wall. It's like their actions, their behaviors don't demonstrate how much they value real inclusion, real diversity, real equity, real allyship. And then they wonder why people don't truly feel like they belong. So,
and why employees also they don't belong, and why they are quiet quitting or quiet leaving or quietly leaving industries because they just don't feel included.
I totally agree with you. I think quiet quitting is the side effect of quiet leadership. If leaders aren't doing what they are supposed to do, then talent won't do what you want them to do. They won't do that. Leadership has to be um, uh, intentional in their actions and their behaviors. So, like, even now, like, I'm seeing so many folks talk about layoffs, but I wonder how many of those companies have talked about trade-offs. Have you went to the organization and let them know how you're going to deprioritize certain things so you can retain as much people as possible? I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that in chief human resource officers, chief people officers. I haven't seen it. Typically, these exercises is there's a group of people that get together with the CFO. They say, "Hey, down market, need to cut X% out of the business as an expense," and then the easiest thing to go cut for them is people. And I think that's the biggest difference for folks like that are in people first companies like a Greenhouse, where they're like, we didn't do that. We were like, no, we're not. We want to protect our people at all costs. So like, what can we do? What trade-offs do we need to make in order to make sure that we prioritize them? And that's the difference, I think, between folks that are more people first or the folks that actually respond to you when you say good morning with something of value, as opposed to folks that are going to be cyclical and just stay in the routine.
Right. What would you suggest to leaders then in order to be able to change the cycle?
I think first and foremost, you have to identify that what type of environment that you're in, which can be a harsh truth for many. And then once you identify what that environment is, be very intentional in trying to determine what do you want to do to fix it. For some people, that may actually mean you're employed by people you don't want to be employed by moving forward. For others, it may mean that you may end up being the catalyst for change that that environment actually needs. But you got to do the courageous assessment of knowing what type of an environment that I'm in. I think the other thing is don't hesitate to reach out to those who have positively navigated those types of headwinds in other environments. There are phenomenal leaders in the space that have traversed these types of environments and have been really successful in either creating a change or moving to an organization where that type of change would be welcomed. And so we have to be able to figure that out. I think last but certainly not least, we got to be able to continue to share these types of practices in shared spaces. And this is where, Michelle, I'm really appreciative for people like you, the Diversity Connections podcast, because what it allows us to do is this is a safe space for us to hear, inbound thought leadership without overtly saying, hey, I needed to hear that, or hey, I struggled with that. So some people may not be in a space where they're like, hey, Donald, I want to pick up the phone and call you all at Greenhouse. If you do, don't hesitate. Like, we got phenomenal people that can help you. But at the exact time, some people might be like, I'm not there yet. Like, I just want to hear some of the different things that people are doing and try to figure out what pieces of that thought leadership we can graft into our culture inside of our organization to change our environment. And if that's where you are, that's okay. Like, that's why folks like Rochelle and the Diversity Nexus podcast exist, to be able to do some of that knowledge sharing in safe ways.
In safe ways. And I think that's probably Thank you, by the way. It's it's telling when people do feel safe on Diversity Connects Us, because that's the point. We need to be psychologically safe. And I think that's another good point when we're talking about um, organizational safety, eh, because sometimes that safety doesn't allow you to be or become your authentic self.
Yep.
So, right? So it leads me to believe that leaders also, it starts from within. What is it that, brings us today as a leader? Why are we leading? How are we leading? And those questions need to be posed to ourselves first before we're even able to help, or support, or lend that support to have, an open dialogue with employees.
I totally agree with you. Um, I believe voices help create change, but you won't hear voices in unsafe environments. And so you have to focus on the environment first. And part of starting in that environment is starting with self. So I totally agree with you. I think the other thing I would encourage, because I know so many leaders who, based on our last conversation, who are dialed in and tapped into um, Diversity Connects Us, there's power in being vulnerable. And I think there's this thought process that leaders feel like because they have a leadership title, regardless of what that title is, whether it's manager, director, VP, all the VPs, all the chiefs, all of the things, like there's this thought process that the portions of their authenticity cannot be shown because it would demonstrate vulnerability. And for those leaders, I would tell you vulnerability is powerful. Um, it allows you to come across as human. So, like for my organization, as recent as last week, I let them know, look, I likely have not been the excited ice cream jolly guy over the last few weeks. Like I'm sure I haven't been. Um, and here's the reason why. Like these are the things that I was focused on as the eldest sibling of four, and as a potential uncle waiting for his nephew to arrive, but listening to all these types of different potential complications that could occur. And like, yeah, I probably wasn't me. Like I probably showed up late to a few meetings. You probably, if you were looking for the encourager like that you're used to getting, it's probably because I needed encouragement. So um, yeah, I think, and what I loved about the response, because I debated to even share it in the first place, but I have a phenomenal coach that was like, no, like there's power in that. And so what I found is like this outpouring of support, this outpouring of encouragement that was like, oh no, like, yo, we have your back. Like, you've had our back. We have your back. When yeah, you encourage us, but we're also here to encourage you. And so that was refreshing. That was rewarding. And I think that just demonstrates the level of safety in the environment where even as a leader, I can demonstrate a certain level of vulnerability and not be worried in the voices that I'm going to hear afterwards. And as a result, the level of action that people took with me personally was just phenomenal. It's through the roof. So yeah.
It's interesting. I read, talking about vulnerability, I read the book, Dare to Lead by Brene Brown.
Yes.
Yeah. And there was an example where she talked about vulnerability to engineers, and it was a Fortune 500 company. And, everyone was blank stares on their face. And when she shared her story, like you just did now, then it was a complete icebreaker. And then one person, and it's generally a male dominated field, and one person got up and said, well, this is what happened to me this morning. And then after that, all the fingers were going up. Oh, this happened and this happened. And and like ice cream, it started, people were just melting, and the gap was becoming smaller and smaller, and people actually felt good. And then the response to that, like you said, the outpouring response, the outpouring support, to receive that encouragement
Yeah.
was priceless.
No, that's Brene is first, she's ahead of her time. I'm reading Anatomy of the Heart right now, and um, she's I'm not even done with it. She's crushing the book. It's amazing. Dare to Lead is also one of my faves. I would say the reason I say she's ahead of her time is because I felt like she was one of those leaders early on that recognized the power and vulnerability, and so as a result, she has seen how vulnerability can actually physically change the environment, like in real time, right? So that's I think we should learn from that. To your point, it's like there's there's a warmth that happens
Mm.
with people when they see others demonstrate vulnerability. I think the other thing I would say though is so many people have like silenced that side of them because
Yeah.
they've been in so many unsafe environments. And believe it or not, like I think the beauty of what she does and so many other leaders is like shift the landscape in an unsafe environment with vulnerability. It does take someone being courageous and bold. Um, they're just less likely to do it because the environment has demonstrated that it's unsafe, right? And so um, that's where I think we got to continue to have like amazing leaders like yourself create these types of mediums where people can go plug in. And that's to me, that's where they get the charge. It's like they get amped up to say, like I know I might be in one of these environments, but like I've listened to 3 of Rochelle's podcast episodes or 4 of her podcast episodes. And so like I feel like in this safe space within this environment, I'm gonna lean in, I'm gonna demonstrate a different level of how I show up. I see the other thing. I see that also in hiring, right? Like the young lady that works with me, Laura, she's here in Atlanta too. She's phenomenal. Laura, if you ever listen to this episode, I think you're an amazing human being. She talks about Rochelle like in her interview process, how she had so much angst and like anxiety in the process. Like she shows up to the interview, she's like, oh my goodness, like the day wasn't going necessarily well. She's super like amped up because she has to like, she wants to win the job, right? Win the job. And yet like her emotions are like fluttered, right? And like the hiring manager that was interviewing her named Katie was like, hey, like let's relax. Like we're good. Like it's okay.
Mm.
Like, and what that demonstrated to me, although I don't know if this was Laura's exact words, it's like Katie recognized that this is an unsafe environment right now for Laura. And want you to do your best job possible in this interview process. I'm willing to do whatever I need to do to let, oh no, this is a safe environment. Like if you need to breathe, if you need to take a sip of water, like if you need some, whatever that is. And I think that's important. Like we need leaders who are.
Oh, we're having a hard time hearing you, Donald. The connection is a little poor.
Oh no, can you see me?
I can't. Oh, now we hear you.
Okay. Where did I cut out?
So you were talking about the interview and how they were trying to talk her through it and and explain to her that this was a safe space, and they were asking her how she felt and that she needed water.
Yeah, and so what I was going with the story is that I think it's imperative. The responsibility falls on leaders to shepherd safe environments, and that doesn't have to only be when it's folks at a E&I convention or if you're at an ERG meeting. Like that's not the only safe environments that leaders have to be shepherds of safety. Like it's throughout the entire business to include candidates that are looking to be hired, and so that illustration for me proved that Laura's voice was heard by hiring manager, Katie, and Katie was willing to let her know, oh no, this is a safe environment. Whatever we need you, whatever we need to do to make sure that you can be your best self during these next few minutes while we talk to one another, we're happy to do that because that's just who we are. And I think more leaders have to demonstrate that level of responsibility and courage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We talked in our last episode about the purpose highway. Can you explain that for us in more detail? I love it. And I used it for the title of this podcast, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. So
I did. I stole it from you.
I'm not mad at that. Believe it or not, like all the questions we've talked about as far as like being intentional and like living life on purpose, right? Like not being a cyclical thing, creating safety for people. That's something you have to be purposeful in doing. Purpose highway for and the way I try to describe it for other people is like we're all here for a purpose. All of us are. And when you like work at places or you where it's a professional relationship, right? Like that's you going down the highway and you're like, oh, like I want to get off. Like I'm get off on this exit. It's still on the purpose highway, but like there's a detour here. Like I'm gonna spend some time here. Oftentimes, though, when people leave organizations and they get back on purpose highway to get to their next exit, that's where I find that organizations leave. They squander a moment. So many companies are really good at creating the first impression.
Mm,
Very few companies are really good at creating the last impression. And on this, for me, living life on purpose or living on purpose highway for me is around like we should be celebrating people when they walk into their next phase of life, whatever that is. That I've heard, I think it was Bezos that said, people are taught to get jobs. Hopefully they're lucky and have a career. And if you're truly fortunate, you'll end up finding calling. And to me, you're just driving down purpose highway in order for you to find those things. But we should be quick to rally behind people and in their growth. Like if they bloom into a new role, that's a beautiful thing. If we should not allow someone else's purpose to create some level of animosity or disregard in us. I think it's quite the opposite. I think I am cheerleaders for people's success. There's people that have grown outside of Greenhouse, and I'm happy for them. Like that's a good thing. So
absolutely. Absolutely. And what would you like our listeners and our audience to take away from this conversation?
I guess I would say two things. If you're not living life on purpose,
Mm,
find a way to get back on your purpose highway. And in doing so, don't rob people of the encouragement that they need because they are living life on purpose. Because I have found that it's like, depending on what place you're in, it's not jealousy, it's just a lack of support.
right.
When you see other people thriving and doing what they need to do. And then the second thing would be, if you are living life on purpose, continue to rally behind those that are still finding theirs. This is where the importance of like champions, mentors, sponsors, like if you've been fortunate enough to find how you continuously contribute to this ecosystem called community or to this ecosystem called your company, like phenomenal, like happy for you, keep thriving. And equally at the same time, you have a responsibility to create that oxygen for others. A lot of people don't realize this when it comes to plants. The reason why plants are able to grow, particularly when they're have close proximity with other ones, is because of their effect in the environment. They're all creating oxygen for the other one to be able to thrive. And it's a good read. That's one of the reasons our IDEA team, our Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Allyship team, came to us last year and said, hey, we want to change our ERGs to arbors. because arbors purify the environment, creating oxygen. And the idea is that we'll create oxygen for all of our communities, whether you're a Jade House, part of our Asian American community, Black House, Full House, which is caregivers, whether it's Trellis, which is for people with disabilities, Verde House, people that are from the Hispanic and Latino and Latinx background, like all of the houses, Rainbow House, LGBTQ plus community. Like the idea is that all of us have a responsibility to create oxygen for everybody else as well. Like it's a community. And there might be micro communities in the community, but all of us are positively contributing. And that's how I feel when it comes to Purpose Highway. Like if you're living life on purpose, if you find the way that you can contribute uniquely to society and to your company and to the community, you have a responsibility to create oxygen for others to do the same.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. My mom's a teacher, and she had, and I'm going to use your plant analogy because that's the memory it triggered for me. We don't have ice cream, but you did trigger a memory, Donald. Next time we'll have ice cream.
Oh, man. That's good.
I know. I was like, I swear, next time we will have ice cream. Literally. So she had she teaches an IBO program in French in Montreal, and she had her students do a project, and
Okay.
everyone had to bring a seed to plant in the classroom. And exactly what you said about the oxygen. So she did an experiment where for some of the plants, they played very excitable, loud music. And then for the other plants, they played classical, soft, instrumental music. And the ones that flourished and grew the fastest and most were the ones where they heard the classical music and the instrumental music. And then the ones that had a hard time sprouting were the ones that were listening to the, harsh and loud and abrasive music. And it's fascinating because they gave the good oxygen, right, to those plants that blossomed and flourished. And then the ones who didn't receive that much oxygen were having a really hard time thriving.
I love that. I did not know that, but I love that because it illustrates so many powerful things. But I think the biggest thing I'm walking away with, Rochelle, is that environments matter for growth. And for better or for worse, none of us got to pick where we landed on the planet. And so you might have landed in an environment that was not conducive for your growth, which is why I think it's important for us to live life on purpose, because purpose says, even if I was able to grow, I have to shepherd those who may be in environments where they were not able to grow. And so hopefully all of us will answer the call of being the classical music needed for someone else's growth, as opposed to being the counter.
Absolutely. I love that. As we reach the top of the Diversity Connects Us hour, I want to thank you all for listening. This podcast highlights lived and shared stories of inspirational strength and tenacity. We share profound and courageous dialogues that influence DEI and emotional intelligence by breaking the barriers and labels of stereotypes, confronting biases, and offering best practices to achieve a more significant and cultural mindset. Stay tuned as we continue to share our voices in the DEI space. To trend with us, #Diversity Connects Us.